Okay, let's do that one more time to let the Meet Magento team know that we really value what they've done today. Ladies and gentlemen, for one last time, how are you feeling today? There we go, there we go. Now we're gonna pause for a quick moment. I know there's quite a few of you that are standing. Do you wanna take a seat really quickly? We're gonna pause for 2 minutes to let everyone grab a seat. Please, we've got a couple over here and a couple over there as well, right? Amazing. Okay, now before we get started, I do have one real quick request. Everyone point to the most responsible person you know in this room. Oh, that's so funny, immediately both of you. I'm gonna need both of you right now, right? So we're gonna take both of you, Myra and yourself, I'm sorry. Harrison, you have a very important task. I need you to keep time tracking for me. Can you do that? Myra, you can do it? Are you in mind? Okay. How much time do I have? About 4 hours, right? Yeah? Okay, I think I have about 40, 45 minutes? Yeah. All right, let's do 40 minutes just to be safe. Myra, you've got it? Oh, Myra's talking to his watch. What are you, James Bond? Right? Okay. How are you feeling? Good? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chirag, right? And you're going to hear a lot about who I am and what I do in just a few moments. But I've got to say, I get to travel the world giving talks about marketing and branding. I get to go to quite a few conferences. This one is definitely a bit unique for me. I hopped on a call with Ravi a little while back, and he goes, oh, you know, we're a community. We're really tight-knit. People really support each other. And I was like, every conference says that, right? But then I came here and I got to learn so much about the history behind Magento, how at a certain point you sort of lost some of the brand, but many of you worked really hard to bring that brand back. And a big part of this conference, honestly, I don't think is necessarily the knowledge that I'm going to share with you, but the amazing experience that I've had just getting to know all of you, right? But I do have one problem, right? And honestly, it has been frustrating me all weekend. Every service provider I speak to, every agency I speak to has been saying the same exact sentence to me. We are the leading agency for Magento. We are the leading service. You can't all be leading, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I will scrap this entire 40-minute talk if we want to sit here and figure out who's the leading brand right now, right? Now, we're going to go ahead and get started, right? And in fact, you know what? Actually, on that note, tech guys, we good on the... There we go. You know, it's okay to be number 2 sometimes. How many of you are familiar with this Avis campaign that happened a while back? We try harder. Oh, not that many of you. How many of you are familiar with Avis, the car rental company? Right? So many years ago, I want to say about the 1960s, right? At the time, they were struggling to compete against, I believe it was Hertz. Hertz was one of the largest car rental companies at the time. And in order to compete against them, Avis decides to go, you know what? We aren't number 1. We're number 2. But that's a value, actually. Because we're number 2, we cannot afford to have bad service. Because we're number 2, we can't afford to not be nice. We can't afford to make you wait. We can't afford dirty ashtrays. They were able to turn what would normally be seen as actually a pretty bad thing to be in a market into a really powerful movement. Some of you, please take notes. You can't all be first. But that being said, now before we get into this conversation in a moment, I am going to say 2 quick things. One, can we do a big round of applause for the Meet Magento team and the amazing work that they've done today? There we go. Ravi and team and all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be on this stage. A second thing I'm going to say is, please, I'm encouraging you to take as many photos, videos, pictures as you possibly can, audio recordings, AI recordings, whatever you want to do. My only ask is, if you get a photo, make sure you get my calves. I've been working on them a little bit. I'm very disappointed by the response on that one. That should have been a resounding wow. Come on, guys, right? And then if you do take any content, please do make sure to tag me on any social media platforms so we can connect and continue the conversation going. Now, before we get into the actual meat of the conversation, do you mind if I take like 2-3 minutes, hold me accountable, right, where I get to talk about who I am and why I'm on this stage? Everyone cool with that? Good to go? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chirag, and perhaps one of the most important things that you should know about me is that I grew up in a small business family. Literally, I grew up at the store. My first toy was my dad's credit card machine. My crib was at the store. Ladies and gentlemen, I could run your credit before I knew my ABCs. Right? In fact, right there, that photo you see is me getting my first sales quota of 5 dresses. I sold 7. You should be clapping, ladies and gentlemen. This is very disappointing right now. No, I'm kidding. But now fast forward many years later, right? I am now the most dynamic, engaging brand marketing speaker you will ever meet. That's a weird statement for someone to throw out. Is he kind of full of himself? A little bit, right? But no, that statement is incredibly important, and we're going to come back to it in just a few moments. So for my 9 to 5, a little bit of context, I'm over at Google, where I get to work with what we call our platinum clients. These are the largest advertisers in the world. I get to work with them on proactive problem solving and crisis management. My 5 to 9, well, I decode history's greatest brand stories so that I can help you write the next. Now, one thing I do need to make clear is that I'm not here in my Google capacity at all in any way, but I do feel that it's an important part of my identity that I do need to share with you all. That being said, now what happens with the whole speaking side of all this? Well, there's 3 components to this. One, we create content for an audience of over 60,000 followers across social media with over 10 million views. I've also been featured on quite a few of these sort of stages for Google for Startup, DigiMarcon, and of course, this stage now that we're adding on for Magento. And lastly, how many of you are familiar with the History Channel? Raise your hands. By the way, we're gonna do a lot of raising hands for this. I'm gonna make sure you're all awake for this, right? But there's a show called The Mega Brands That Built America. Obviously going over the big brands that exist in America and how they started, right? But on there, they let your boy be on season 2, right? So if you scroll through the sort of episodes, I really thought this was gonna be my big break. I'm gonna on the History Channel. Everyone's gonna be like, wow, I want your autograph. I wanna get to know you. None of my friends have seen any of the episodes, right? But, I have at least 20, in fact, we should have a slide. I'm gonna do it next time with the screenshots of all of them. All of my friends did text me the same exact thing. Everyone said, hey, my dad was watching History Channel. Hey, my uncle was watching History Channel. So ladies and gentlemen, in the demographic of American men from 45 to 65, I'm a hit. Everyone else, no idea who I am, right? But we'll change that hopefully over time. Now, moving into there, actually, quick moments. How did that feel about my background? How am I doing on time so far? Was that 2-3 minutes? I was tight? Good? Amazing. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, today we're gonna talk about the brand clarity framework. Over the last 8 years, I've had the pleasure of working with some of the largest corporations in the world, down to mom and pop shops. I've worked with celebrities all the way down to people just building their personal careers here in corporate America. And along the way, I realized that no matter what your scale was, the same 3 problems kept emerging, and the same main problem. If there's one thing that I have met anyone who's trying to build a brand and their fear that they have is that fear of being forgotten. Because you put so much work into building your personal brand, how you present, who you are, the brands that you are building with your agencies, with your actual, the consumer brands that you are building, the service providers that are here. You put so much time and energy into this, only for then people to forget what's going on. Well, my job is to help you sort of tackle that in a very actionable framework. So step 1, this idea that I clearly want to be known for something. For that, we're gonna talk about something called your key brand echoes. What are the words that you want people to echo back when they're speaking about you? For people saying that I want people to be engaged and interested in what I'm talking about, I'm gonna teach you how to tell the right types of stories. And finally, for those of you that are saying, look, I've got the stories, I've got the words, but how do I get people to really commit? How do I get them to hit me up after the conference, after they've heard my stories? Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna talk about the brand curiosity theory for that. How are we feeling so far? How's my pace? How's my tone? Are we good? Going pretty well, right? Audio guys, are we doing? Pretty good? Cameras, all good? Right? Everyone please give a big shout out, round of applause for Gene in the back. Now Gene has arguably please, a round of applause for Gene, right? He's doing. So Gene probably has arguably the worst job in this room right now, because I actually had once after a talk, a videographer come up to me sweating, drenched in sweat, and he goes, Chirag, I'm never doing one of your events again. And I go, why? And he goes, because you won't sit still. Right? And so Gene is probably gonna be sweating by the end of this, right? But thank you so much for the work that you're all doing. Okay, so to get started, we're gonna talk about your brand echoes. In my world, there's often a discussion, right? Branding versus marketing. I'm often arguing that it's not branding versus marketing, but rather branding and marketing. And the way we explain that, well, ladies and gentlemen, your brand is who you are. And your marketing is, well, how you will tell me that. A better way for us to explain this is that your branding are the words, the terms, the feelings, the emotions that you want me to associate with your brand, or with your business and what you're doing. And your marketing is you finding unique and interesting ways to remind me. Making sense so far? How are we doing, right? This guy's very abstract. Let's get into some examples, ladies and gentlemen. For that, actually, that brings us to the first, my bad, I got a little excited way too early, right? But that brings us to the first sort of method or tactic that I'm gonna share with you. If you have a brand, a business, or a personal brand that you're trying to build at the moment, what I want you to do is I want you to identify 3 to 4 terms, feelings, emotions, colors, whatever that might be. And your marketing, unique ways to remind people. What do we mean by that? That statement that I had in the beginning, very intentional. And you'll notice that I drew a lot of attention to it right in the beginning by actually calling out how audacious it sounds right off the bat. I do that on purpose, ladies and gentlemen, because the thing is, when you leave this talk, and many of you afterwards are gonna talk to some of your colleagues who were too hungover to show up in the morning, right? Which, by the way, actually, last night I went around to each of the dinners, right? And everyone I met, I said, hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna be speaking tomorrow morning. Even if you're hungover, make sure you still show up. And then one person was like, I'll show up if you get us a Bloody Mary's budget. I'm gonna let you guys know, I tried to fight for you, Ravi vetoed that immediately, right? So that's Ravi's problem right there, right? But as I was saying, when you leave this conference and people are asking, hey, how was Chirag? What was this talk about and what was he doing? I want you to use some very specific words. I want you to use, he was an engaging speaker. He was dynamic. He talked about brand marketing, stories, clarity. These words are words that I've chosen, very intentional about my brand. And rather than leaving it up to you, because let's be realistic, all of you have millions of things going on in your lives. I would be relying on you at any given moment to have a good mood or good thought about me to be able to accurately represent me. So instead of leaving that on to you, I give you the words that I would want you to use. But let's move into some real-world examples. How many of you are familiar with Heinz ketchup? Raise your hands for me real quick. Nice, quite a few of you. Okay, great. So Heinz is by far the wildest marketing team I've ever met in my life, right? So Heinz has 3 words that they want to be known for, the 3 echoes that they have. Red, slow, 57. Red because it's the quality of the ketchup. Slow, which means that it's coming out of the bottle. Slow, which means it's thick, it's not watered down. And finally, 57, there are 57 varieties. Now, in order to do that, in order to turn that into their marketing, they come up with unique ways to remind you. For example, those of you that are building websites here, Heinz once had their website take 57 minutes to load. I'll say that one more time, ladies and gentlemen. 57 minutes to load. And it wasn't even like an interesting loading screen. No, it was that red loading screen up there, right? But it reinforced their echoes. It was red, it was slow, 57. Now, if you're one of those lucky, unlucky people who got stuck in that sort of workflow, well, if you stuck around until the end, you got rewarded with a bunch of discounts and a grilling kit. Or they do things like partnering up with Lick, the paint company here in the US, to come out with special red paint that is Heinz color. I mean, come on, slow, red, right? Or doing things like coming out with a puzzle set, 570 pieces, all red puzzle set, ladies and gentlemen. What, right? But red, slow, 57. Lastly, how many of you are familiar with Waze, the navigation app? Raise your hands for me. Again, y'all, you're gonna get a workout in today, right? But Waze, the navigation app in Canada, they partnered up with them. You know how when you're stuck in traffic, it turns red in front of you, the navigation? Well, if you were stuck in traffic and you were going at a relatively similar speed to what the bottle or the ketchup is supposed to leave the bottle, yes, it's a science. They have a very specific number they want you to use. They were doing it in kilometers per hour, so obviously the American in me didn't understand that, right? But it's a very specific number that you can look into. And then as soon as you were running on that speed, well, they would give you a coupon. Again, red, slow, 57. How are we feeling so far? Good? Making sense? Let's look at another example. How many of you are familiar with Taco Bell? Raise your hands real quick. Nice, okay, so Taco Bell. How many of you have had Taco Bell one night when you were really drunk out? Oh yeah, there you go. Come on, there's way more. You guys are, those that haven't raised your hands, you're definitely lying. 100%, right? But Taco Bell, did you know Taco Bell has its own luggage that looks just like the hot sauce packets? Did you know that Taco Bell has its own resort that has little hot sauce pillows and little floaties in the pool? Did you know that Taco Bell has its own retirement home? Yeah, that one's a bit shocking, right? Because ladies and gentlemen, the echoes that come for Taco Bell are live más, live life to its fullest potential. They realize that quite a few people like dating Taco Bell after partying. Most brands would kind of freak out about that association, a very unpredictable consumer base, right? Taco Bell says, screw it, let's lean right into it, let's help them have some parties, right? And so they're consistently trying to find ways to reinforce that idea of go out, enjoy, have fun, and while you're doing that, live más. Right? Now, retirement home one is a very interesting one because the luggage and the resort makes sense. The retirement home, well, it's not for it's not for people over 65. It's for young individuals, right? The idea is when I believe it was from 21 to 65, right? So before retirement age. The idea is that you would show up and you would do all the things you would normally do in a retirement home, but it was all about introspection, right? Is that why wait to relax and enjoy some of these things when you're older? Why not live life to its fullest when you're young? From there, another example. First of all, talk about the world's coolest mascot, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Burger King King. That is crazy, right? But Burger King, their echoes are all about being funny and mischievous, right? The king comes in and he does whatever the hell he wants to do. For example, how many of you are familiar with Michelin stars? Right? A very, very sort of coveted award that many restaurants around the world want to have, and often associated with really fine or refined cooking. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a very fancy restaurant, but it has to be sort of a process that you've built over time, something that's really meaningful. Burger King came out with a new burger, and they argued that technically it should have a Michelin star. Right? And so they put out an entire ad campaign, right, saying this, hey, if you're an inspector for the Michelin star program, well, we want you to come and try our burger. We think it deserves a Michelin star. Michelin actually sent 2 people to go review it, right? Eventually, people were like, oh my God, you have to go review this. They didn't get the star, right? But it was still a funny way to reinforce that message. How many of you have seen this ad right here? The one where the guy's holding the little burger up? No? Oh my God. It's a 15-second ad. Somehow became one of the most famous ads, I want to say 2017. In that ad, this Burger King employee, he's talking about whatever the new burger, I believe is the Whopper at that point, or something that they'd come out with. And he goes, oh, let me tell you about this burger. Wait a second, I only have 15 seconds. Instead, let me go, hey, Google, tell them about the burger. They hijacked people's TVs, right? Because you were normally playing your TV on a really loud volume. All of a sudden, everyone who owned a Google Home Assistant at home, suddenly now their Google Home sparked up and go, this is what this Burger King thing does. Again, mischievous, let me try to hijack what's going on. And the last good example is the Whopper detour. How many of you have heard of this before? Oh my God, you're gonna love this. So they were using geo-targeting to find out that if you downloaded their app, and if you were within 600 feet radius of any McDonald's, they would give you a 1 cent coupon, like they would give you a coupon for like a Burger King burger for just 1 cent. The idea being that the closer and closer you got to McDonald's, the cheaper and cheaper everything became, right? To drive you right back to them. That led to a record number of downloads. I think it was over 100 million downloads. Don't quote me on this, please, in about 24 hours for their app. Pretty insane. Let's go on from there. So those were some of the extreme examples, right? I'm gonna give you some more realistic examples right now. UNICEF, how many of you are familiar with what UNICEF does, right? So in the UK, they did a study a few years back, and they found that a large majority of adults in the UK had no idea that UNICEF worked with children. For those of you that know what UNICEF does, like yourself here, that's all they do, right? Children are their main demographic that they're trying to help. And so obviously a massive brand crisis. What do we do at this point? Ladies and gentlemen, let's just take our echoes for the kids and put it on every marketing campaign that we can put. So that's when we started seeing ads come out like this: for every child, vaccination. For every child, answers. For every child, every right. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Because ladies and gentlemen, I'm no magic man. And I'd love to sit here and tell you I'm a genius. Not really, right? All I've done is figured out that the most effective, iconic brands that have stood the test of time, and we can go back 300, 400 years back even, to the brands that still exist today, that are still able to keep it running, the most important thing they've done, they kept it simple, they kept it consistent. Because simplicity and consistency leads to brand reality. Leading from there. Now, those were all, like earlier, it was a little bit about like the feeling, right? The type of persona that a brand might have, when we saw with Heinz, Taco Bell, or Burger King. With UNICEF, that was a lot more repetition, right? But I want to talk also about tone and language, because I want to make this realistic for you, right? Like, how does this apply when we're building e-commerce websites? Well, there's a brand called Boost Immunity, and I thought they had a really cool landing page, right? Their entire page, instead of focusing on trying to be very scientific and forward and yeah, like our thing is going to help you do XYZ thing, instead they focus on having fun with it, right? So all of the language on their site is centered around this like, being sick sucks, stay sick, not sick, right? All this sort of fun language. Versus 01, which I believe is one of the sponsors here at this conference. Please raise your hand if you're here from 01. Oh, that is so embarrassing. They're still there, out there. That's so funny. When you guys go out there, just be like, yo, the speaker shouted you out and he's charging $5,000, right? But the 01, right, one of the platinum sponsors here, I really like their page, because right as soon as you come on their page, it's not, oh, we're like this professional agency that, no, it's cut the bullshit, right? We're not a dev agency, we're a delivery agency, right? And they reinforce that tone and language throughout their website, including on their sort of the blog. Now, most blogs would try to be a little professional and use professional photos, right? They use, you know, I'll be honest, I really don't understand these photos. If anyone talks to the 01 teams, please help me understand why they're using people crying, but I think it's supposed to show you the frustration people feel and how they can help you solve for it, right? But these are ways that they've incorporated that same tone. These are easy ways. Stock images, simple language. They found a specific tone of language that they want to use, and they're just consistently using it. Moving from there, how many of you know McMaster-Carr? Nice, some of you, right? So McMaster-Carr is an industrial supplier from the 1900s, probably even older than that, actually. But in the 1900s, they came out with an entire paper catalog. Obviously, at the time, black and white for the most part, right? In fact, yesterday when we were in a conversation, we were actually someone was mentioning, you know, like, I still get these little catalogs and I don't know what to do with them. Or like, hey, I have like a pretty outdated way of how I share. I still share things in paper. How do I translate that over to my website? Well, McMaster realized that for the most part, people actually trust them when it's black and white. People don't really care about the flashy stuff. They want someone who's reliable. And this is a brand that has consistently won awards for the last 20, 30 years for people saying that they're one of the most reliable brands that they ever work with. Their website, ladies and gentlemen, looks exactly like a catalog. black and white, with small hints of green. In fact, I'd encourage you, look, that screenshot I'm showing you is their homepage, ladies and gentlemen. No frills, no fancy animations, nothing crazy, because they knew that for their audience, what felt real was that feeling of having a catalog. Now I'm gonna pause there for a quick moment. Timers, how are we doing right now? Wow, I think good, okay. How are we doing, Meyer? Meyer's on his phone too. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not the most responsible people. No, you're good, you're good. There we go, there we go. But another cool example, Allbirds. How many of you are familiar with Allbirds? The shoe company? Yep, quite a few of you, okay. So Allbirds has a big sort of eco-friendly vibe, right? Their entire idea is we're doing this for the environment. Now, it's very easy for many companies to say they're doing things for the environment, and then it sort of falls apart. They just have one little page on the side of their website that says, here's what we're looking at, like the environment. In their case, instead, they've really honed in on that language, right? Whether it comes to naming their shoes or the products that they're using, the blues and bloom, grounded and neutral, tree glider, or when they're talking about throughout their pages, talking about their commitment to using sustainable resources. And one of the most fun things that I thought was incredibly easy to implement on their website once they had the data was the carbon footprint of designing each one of the shoes. Once they were able to calculate that, it became a nice little sticker that went on the website, helped the consumers reaffirm their identity that, yes, by purchasing Allbirds shoes, I am helping the environment. How's that sound so far, right? All these examples relatively realistic, right? Simple to implement. Nice. So going from there, just as we close out, every example I've given you so far is all about expansive thinking. Can we try to grow our user base as much as we can, right? These are overarching. There's sometimes brands who use their echoes, instead of trying to encourage certain people in, is to actually exclude others, right? Now, this can be very dangerous to do, right? So be very tasteful with it. But a good brand that does this is Gymshark. How many are familiar with Gymshark? Okay. Now, how many of you own Nike clothing, but you don't actually work out in it? You use it because you're sitting at home. You all are lying. There's no way that we're all doing push-ups. You know what? No, that is ridiculous. But Nike, right, obviously has seen a big rise in what we call leisure wear. So athlete clothing, but for leisurely stuff, right? Sitting at home. There's nothing more comfy than my Nike tech set when I'm sitting at home watching TV, eating potato chips, right? But Gymshark realized that, you know what? This is not the type of audience we want. We don't want you wearing our clothes at home. We want you wearing them in the gym. And so they came out with a campaign that said, we don't do everything good. We do one thing great. We do gym, right? And they reinforced that message over and over again on their website. Now, this does two things. One, right, it helps people go, oh, wow, they do gym. Yes, I'm a gym person, so I'm going to prescribe to this. But it also makes it very clear to their audience, because we tailor only to people who are going to the gym, it means that we're going into the details. We're making sure that these are the best shorts you could use for deadlifting or whatever you might be doing, right? They're being very deliberate about the message that they're sending. Ladies and gentlemen, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter how much time you spent in your brand, right? The reality is now I've been doing speaking here for about 4 years now, and what I've learned the hard way is that no matter how much work and effort I put into this, at the end of the day, if someone asks you about me, you're probably gonna say maybe 4 sentences. So all 4 years of my effort and all the work that you ever do will probably reduce into a few sentences. This is what this person does. This is what I thought about them. Here's how you could connect with them. Maybe an opinion statement, right? When was the last time one of your friends asked you about a brand and you sat there for 30 minutes hyping it up? No, right? You just kind of gave your own little thoughts and you moved on. So ladies and gentlemen, if everything you are doing is going to be reduced into simply a few words or a few sentences, shouldn't we be intentional about those words are? Shouldn't they be your words? Now, to close out this section, I'm gonna give you 3 pieces of advice. 1, please keep this simple. When you're choosing your brand echoes, the words you want people to use, keep it simple. Red, slow, 57, not unique special words. Many other brands can use that as well. Your moment to shine is in the marketing strategies that you use, the way you show those words. But the actual words, keep them simple, right? Now, the second thing is keep it consistent. Repetition, 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 ladies and gentlemen. In fact, anytime the brand books time with me to sort of go over their brand marketing, the first thing I tend to do is I have my team scrape their entire website for all the text we can find, and we throw it into a word cloud generator, right? And then we try to see, now how many of you are familiar with the word cloud generators, right? The more times a word pops up, the bigger that word is gonna be shown. I can tell your brand echoes before you and I get into a conversation. And if what I've found is not what you want, then you have a major brand identity crisis. I want these words to pop up over and over again. Now, there's someone who told me, Chirag, I'm scared that people are going to get annoyed by me repeating this over and over again. Richard Branson, one of the most famous people in the world, right? The founder behind the Virgin Atlantic brand, Virgin Brands in general, right? If you'll notice, almost every single article that is ever written about him, they somehow mention that he's an adventurer. What does that mean, right? Like everyone's kind of an adventurer if you travel a little, right? But why does he always get adventurer? Because he's deliberate about constantly mentioning that word. In fact, in his bio on the Virgin website, I think within like a 2-paragraph section, he's mentioned the word adventure, some version of it, like 3 or 4 times. Now, if he can get away with it, trust me, you're gonna be fine, right? And the last thing is keep it audited, right? So please take the time every now and then to do the word cloud generator idea or to send your website to your friends and be like, hey, what do you think I do? And see what words people are using. Because what might end up happening is even if they're not using the words you want them to, you might discover better words from them, right? Okay, so that ends up closing out our first section, right? The idea that if you feel like people don't really know what you do or you're not very clear about your message, I want you to find your deliberate key echoes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna do a quick check here. How are the energy levels in the room right now? Yeah? Oh, we can do a little bit better. Ladies and gentlemen, how are the energy levels in this room right now? There we go, there we go. Oh, did you just lift the, oh, nice. I love that, I love that. Okay, so going from there, ladies and gentlemen. Now, once you have your echoes, once you have the words that you want people to use, well, that's great, but that's only the difference between a business versus a brand. A business gets to exist in a vacuum. I don't care what the company that sells my paper clips is saying. I want the cheapest paper clips, I want to go in, run out, move on. But I do care what my brands, the Nikes, the Apples, the Googles, whatever brand I might be using, I do care that they talk, that they have some sort of voice. Good brands, ladies and gentlemen, that voice, those words, they're consistent, they're echoes. And the greatest brands, ladies and gentlemen, are the ones that connect with me, that resonate with me, allow me to see themselves in their brand and keep me going along with them. And in order to help you do that with your brands, or if you're an agency and a service provider and you want to help your clients in order to do this, we've identified 8 different story types over the years. These are 8 types that we're going to walk through. I'm going to give you examples as well as how they're so powerful. Let's move on. So the first one, how many of you are familiar with Beauty Blender? Few of you, okay, right? So Beauty Blender, it's kind of a type of sponge, right, that helps you blend your beauty makeup, right? It helps you blend your makeup. Now, the foam, the product itself is that pink little foam piece. In of itself, if I gave you a little piece of foam, right, and said, hey, this is for you, you'd probably be like, well, okay, cool, put it in your pocket, throw it out the moment you get, right? Because in of itself, a piece of foam is almost useless. What's the value? But ladies and gentlemen, this sells for like at least double digits. I'm talking $13, $14, depending on where you're going. $20 right now. Inflation is hitting everyone, right? But why? The value comes from the origin story, ladies and gentlemen. Because the original founder, Ria Ann Silva, and I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Now, Ria actually used to be a makeup artist on the sets of Hollywood. She was working on a show that was one of the first shows to have ever moved over to HD cameras. And so when they noticed, like once they started playing it back, they noticed that between takes, if your makeup wasn't blended, before this, it didn't really matter. The cameras weren't that good quality. But now it really mattered, right? And so she started experimenting to try to figure out what would be the great solution to this, ends up coming up with this. But when it was introduced into the market, your origin story, ladies and gentlemen, is about either building credibility, here's all the cool things we've done in the past, and so you should trust us, or it's to build relatability. Here's where we come from, do you come from there as well? Well, let's go together. In her case, it was both. Because she was able to say, hey, the Beauty Blender comes from the sets of Hollywood. And by the way, this was because I was struggling with this issue, which many people struggle with as well. So when people saw the product, they said, oh my God, me too, I need this, I need this. Make sense? Moving from there, let's go to your value stories. Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that Netflix has an army of monkeys that it lets loose in its servers? How many of you knew this? Some of you know this, some of this know you. Yeah, it's called the chaos monkey, right? So many years ago, Netflix wanted to test whether their servers could handle suddenly going down. Right? What happens if we let, say, a monkey let loose into our servers? Can people react real time? We're not gonna prep anyone for this. We're gonna do it in the middle of the day. And you know what? We're gonna take down entire regions and see how people react to this. Stress testing, right? So they wrote a program that went and sort of did this disruptive action. Most companies would be like, hey, we're gonna do some stress testing. Would you like to come on? Hey, we're gonna test the systems. Please, play along with us, do this, right? No, Netflix went, hey, we're gonna release that chaos monkey, good luck, right? And it worked. It was an incredibly successful program. So they ended up creating a suite of products like this called the Netflix Simian Army. And they all, it was all different things. One took down a region, another took down an entire continent, different things like this. But it became a very successful program that they eventually spun out. Now, the reason I bring this up is that your value stories are all about signaling to the outside world, this is what we as a team, as a culture, like and do. And a good example of this is in 2009, I want to say. At the time, Reed Hastings, I believe, was still the CEO of Netflix. And yeah, it was Reed Hastings, right? Anyone want to fact? Okay, no one's fact-checking me on that one, so we're going to run with that one, right? But he released what they called the Netflix Culture Deck. It was an entire deck that went over exactly how managers should be reacting, how employees should be acting. Things like don't aim to promote or aim to be very realistic with people. Don't lead people on. Things like this. And he released it publicly. Why? Because it was a signal to the rest of the world, hey, this is what we believe in internally. And so if you believe in the same things, come join us. Come work for us. How many of you have spent time working on finding someone to hire, go through the entire onboarding process, and then sit there and be like, oh, this isn't really a culture fit? Netflix doesn't really struggle with that, right? Because they're very upfront to begin with. So you know what you're signing up for when you begin, right? But going from there, we have our offering stories. These are the most common types of stories that you're going to tell, right? What is it that we offer? What are the products that we sell? So I'm going to give a little bit of a twist, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about reframing. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have seen this Monopoly ad before? Any of you? No. How many of you have gotten into a fight with someone while playing Monopoly? Raise your hands. Yes, quite a few of you, right? Well, Hasbro, the owner of Monopoly, found that in a study that out of 10 people, 8 people get into a fight with someone while playing Monopoly. That's a wild statistic, right? Most brands are like, oh my God, our product makes people fight. Like, what? No, Monopoly was like, screw that, let's don't into that, right? So they worked with someone in Holland, a psychologist, and what they found out was that actually this is a good thing because Monopoly allows kids, especially, to experience real-world situations in a safe environment. Bankruptcy, not getting your way, someone cheating, the bank somehow always makes money when you don't, right? Very realistic, right? But it was all about like, you know what, let them get mad, let them lose their temper, let them fight, because you'd rather they do it in a safe environment when they're young and you can teach them how to handle it than later on in the real world. This repositioned Monopoly. It wasn't no longer a game, right? Because obviously if you go to any toy aisle and you see the games, there's hundreds of them. How do I decide which one my kids should be playing with? Well, there's only one that's positioned itself as not only a game, but also a child development tool as well. Oh, so I must go for that one, right? Or a good example, how many of you have bitten your MasterCard recently? No one? Bitten, like take the MasterCard in your mouth, bite. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Did you know MasterCard has its own smell? Did you know that MasterCard has its own taste? No comment there, no comment there. But ladies and gentlemen, MasterCard also has its own sound. Now, obviously, I'm joking when it comes to biting the actual card itself. But over the last year, how many of you are familiar with the Priceless campaign that MasterCard runs, right? So many years ago, I want to say 1990s, at the time there was this big narrative, right? Credit cards are really bad for you, people are getting into credit card debt and all this, right? So MasterCard does a study, and they wanted to understand why people buy things that they can't normally afford. And they found that it was often an emotional purchase, not a rational one, right? But a very unique type of emotional approach. Because people would say things like, hey, I bought a TV that I normally couldn't afford because now it gives me and my kids and my family an excuse to sit together for dinner and spend time. I paid for those baseball tickets that I normally never would have bought because my child really loves baseball and it was time that I got to spend with them. So yes, that cost me money, but the end result was priceless for me. And so they ran the Priceless campaign, which ended up becoming one of the most famous, longest running campaigns, and to this day still runs. Now, recently I had a chance to speak with one of the brand managers over at MasterCard, and they go, yeah, Chirag, we've worked with this, a chef to come out with special macaroons. That's the official taste of MasterCard. We've come out with a sommelier to come out with a special perfume, and we've worked with in-house artists to come out with an album and a track. And he goes, in fact, Chirag, anytime you go, okay, let's play a game really quick. If I go, ba-da-da-ba-ba, what company? McDonald's, right? If I go, da-dun, Netflix, ladies and gentlemen, right? Sounds are the new frontier of marketing, and they're very, very powerful. Now, MasterCard eventually wants to get to the point that whenever you swipe your MasterCard anywhere in the world, whether you're on a terminal or online, it's going to make a very specific sound, and they want you to associate that sound with them. This is looking at your echoes more than simply the words or what you can see and maybe feel, but also what can you taste, what can you feel around you, right? Going from there, another example is Guinness. How many of you are avid Guinness fans? Any? Okay, quite a few of you, right? You have way more patience than I do, yo. I can't, right? So Guinness, what they found in 1998, that an average Guinness pour took about 119 seconds. Actually, 119.5 seconds to be exact. That's a long time. That's about 2 minutes that you're waiting for someone to pour this out while there's a busy bar going up around you. Now, when they wanted to sort of tackle this, or when in 1998, they wanted to change agencies, actually, marketing agencies. So they sent out a brief, and in the brief, they actually wrote, hey, Guinness takes a long time to pour. Please don't mention that. We don't want to keep bringing attention to it. The ad agency at the time said, screw that. Let's bring attention to it, and let's reframe it. Reframing is so powerful because you could take the worst quality of your product and somehow turn it into the amazing, sort of defying thing. And in this case, it's Guinness, and it says, good things come to those who wait. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, those who wait. And now suddenly what was seen as like a defect is seen as a pretty powerful thing. A good example of this that I think Delta has done an amazing thing, ladies and gentlemen. I exclusively fly Delta right now, right? And I'm obsessed because their marketing is so amazing. And one of the good examples is that they have this rule that once you land and the doors open to your plane, within 20 minutes, you should be able to have your luggage, right? That's a pretty wild claim to make. And if you don't, well, you can fill out a form and then they'll give you, I don't know, it's like 2,500 points or whatever, right? A very powerful program, because what happens, I had a friend of mine, she loves traveling, right? As soon as the plane landed, right, she's like on her phone, I'm like, hey, she's like, shut up. I'm like, okay. I was like, everything okay? She's like, I'm focusing. Goes, turns on the timer. I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, shut up, walk really slow, right? And I was like, okay. And obviously she's paying attention to this the entire time. And when I realized this is also my friend who typically has no patience, right? But all of a sudden now she was willing to wait the 20 minutes. In fact, she wanted it to take 20 minutes. I want those 2,500 points, Chirag, right? They had somehow managed to take what would normally be like a frustration, oh, I gotta go get my bag, to people going like, I hope they take their time this time. And the beauty is, what does this really cost Delta? Because all they're really giving you is points, something that they can control the value of in the future. A good example also is like Uber or any of these sort of apps that allow you to see how far the driver is. Oh my God, I track that person so heavily, right? I feel like they're James Bond and I'm whoever's on the other side, right? It's like, great. They took a left turn, I'm like, oh, rookie mistake, should have taken a right there, right? But it was it. 10 minutes left? 4? Okay. Okay. Got you. Okay, so then we're going to move a little bit faster here, ladies and gentlemen. The other type of story is your societal stories. These are all about where you stand on societal issues, of course. Now, of course, some brands take it massive. Think of Nike with BLM, right? Black Lives Matter. Or most brands don't really have to take such a massive stance on things, right? In fact, I'd encourage you not to unless you're very specifically focused on something. A good example of this is Tony's Chocolate Lonelies, right? Which is a chocolate brand. And if you'll notice, all of the pieces are uneven. Why? Because it's supposed to represent the uneven sort of dynamics within the chocolate trade, especially with the usage of child labor or slave labor in the chocolate. A very unique way for them to quickly plug that in. They could have just had regular sized chocolate or regular pieces and moved from there, but instead they made it a deliberate choice to have those uneven pieces. Another story type is your audience story. This is all about letting people know, hey, this is who we cater to. If you prescribe to this, you should connect with us. Many of you are going to hear from Chewy later on today, right? The CEO of Chewy. And one of the things I really liked about them is that during the pandemic even, every week they would send out 1,000 or more than 1,000 free hand-drawn pictures of people's pets to them. Often as a surprise. You order something, customer service talks to you, asks you a little bit about your pets, what you're doing, and then when you receive your product, in it is also a hand-drawn portrait of your pet. A very easy, but a very amazing, like sort of brand customer centricity play there. And when they did a mural to celebrate their 10-year anniversary, instead of painting anything else, they decided to paint actual pets from actual loyal customers that they've had, right? Reinforcing that idea that we're here for those that are sticking with us and the most important furry person in your life. Another good example of this is actually back in the 1970s, I want to say. Here in the US, we saw the rise of the women's liberation movement. It was part of the larger feminist movement in which we saw the rise of the hyper-independent American woman with disposable income. Whenever that happens, obviously brands run to try to take that disposable income, right? One of the brands was Philip Morris when they came out with Virginia Slims, because at the time, many of the other brands were already associated to catering towards men. So Virginia Slims finds that for the most part, the women that were part of this movement, they wanted to be seen as independent, as fashion forward, as constantly doing something productive. And so they came out with an ad campaign that said, "You've come a long way, baby," in which they showed these fashion forward, busy women constantly doing all these amazing things. And instead of trying to convince you to buy Virginia Slims, they said, "Oh, well, you love what this woman's doing? She likes Virginia Slims. Oh, you want to be just like her? That means you must like Virginia Slims." Now, I've got to be very clear, I'm very against smoking, right? But I do think it is incredibly important for us to learn from even some of the darkest parts of our history to make sure that we don't end up repeating them or that if we do so mindfully and in a positive way. Creating a persona that your audience can prescribe to is an incredibly powerful tactic. A good example of this is what Rave Digital is doing on their website. Obviously, you see the case studies. Now, they have all these amazing statistics of all these amazing pieces of code that they've written over time, but instead of focusing on just that, they decided to come out with case studies. Here's how we help this customer do this. Many of you have case studies on your websites as well. An easy way for anyone to come in and be like, oh, they did it for another construction company? I'm a construction company, great. Let me prescribe into it. Make sense? Okay, we're moving a little bit faster here. Your collab stories are all about getting people excited to work with you, to collaborate with you. A good example of this is IKEA working with Lego to come out with these special sets that allow you to actually put little Lego pieces on top of it to build something, but also become a storage unit, allowing IKEA to reinforce their echoes of like smart, sustainable, fun ways to store things, and Lego's idea of literally thinking outside of the box and building something there. Moving from there, how many of you are familiar with Logines? Logines watch company? No. Yo, check out their website, ladies and gentlemen. It is insanely cool. Like you scroll through it and this plane guides you everywhere you need to go and everything, right? And pretty much in this, they're all creating their mythos. These are the myths, the legends, the stories behind your brand that get people excited. How many of you are familiar with the, actually what they do here is they tell quite a lot of history, like Amelia Earhart and some of the most famous aviators in the world. The idea being is you're not just buying a watch, you're buying into that history. How many of you are familiar with the Duolingo bird? Yeah, quite a few of you. For those of you that aren't, this mascot represents a language learning app, right? And one of the weirdest things about this mascot is that it twerks, loves Dua Lipa, threatens people if they don't complete their trainings. Oh, and by the way, also has babies with the Scrub Daddy mascot. Very, very weird. See, many years ago, Duolingo, the language app, would give you notifications if you weren't doing your daily lessons. And I know we're going to go a little bit over on time if you don't mind here, right? But they would give you sort of notification. They'll go, hey, you haven't done your lesson, do your lesson. And over time, it would get more and more serious. Do your lesson. You haven't done your lesson. Why aren't you doing your lesson? And to a point where people started coming on social media under Duolingo's Instagram page and started going, hey, Duolingo, I completed my training for day. Can I get my wife and kids back, please? Right? And dude, most brands would freak out about this. But instead, they decided to create this mascot that went completely eccentric, and people resonate with them. I have a friend of mine who literally does this only because she doesn't want the Duolingo app to get mad at her later on. She doesn't care about learning Spanish. Somehow she's learned Portugal, French, and Spanish. Why? Because she doesn't want this random bird to be mad at her. Right? But going from there, coming into our last type of story, and we're going to close out in a few minutes here, your future stories. All about saying, hey, if anything I've said so far hasn't excited you, here's what we're coming up to next. You just heard what the Magento Association is going to do with sort of the upcoming next months as well, right? These are all about getting people to come along with you. But sometimes they can all be about getting your audience to tell you where you're going next. For example, Starbucks came out with something called My Idea Starbucks, which allows you to submit your ideas of what you want Starbucks to do. They've deprecated the program since then, but while it was running, they got over 150,000 submissions, leading to things like the cake pops, leading to pumpkin spice lattes, and of course, offering free Wi-Fi on their locations. 3 very powerful things that Starbucks is known for. Another good example is Lego Ideas, where they allow you to actually come up with ideas of future Lego sets, vote on them, and then if it's a good community pick, they'll turn it into an actual set. Here's where we're going next. Why don't you tell us where you think we're going next? The reason why I tell people to tell these stories or have these stories is I don't just want you to have them abstract. I want you to go home today, work with your team to open a Google document, and in that, I want you to write 500 words for each of these stories. Origin story, where we come from, product story, what do we sell, that kind of stuff. And you'll end up creating a document that's 4,000 words in your tone, your language, in your words. Why is this so important? Because now it becomes a unifying document. Someone goes, hey, I've got to update the website. What am I putting on it? Copy and paste from the document. Hey, I'm going to a conference. What should be on our sales material? Copy and paste from the document. Hey, I'm about to go talk to some investors. What should I be doing? Copy and paste from the document. It allows you to have a unified language and make sure that you are aligned across your company. Now, we're going to skip over this, but at some point, you're going to keep seeing these QR codes pop up as well, and we're going to pass out some papers later on in the day where you can scan the QR code to learn more and get access to some of the post-talk resources. But I want to keep moving forward to finish out this last part and let you all go to coffee here. But now, when you're saying, I want to understand what my words are, what I want people to say about me, identify your echoes. Well, once you have your echoes, turn them into stories so that they're easier to communicate with people. But if you came up to someone in a conference and you just started saying all your stories all of a sudden, it'd be really weird for you to do that, right? So when and how do I tell my stories, Chirag? Well, that brings us into the last part of the conference, this talk, right, that we're going to wrap up very, very quickly, the brand curiosity theory. Someone comes up to me and says, who are you? I never just say, oh, I am. That's weird. What's that? It's not this one. No. Thank you. But I don't sit there and I just go, I am. That's not enough information. That feels a little weird, right? But we see brands do it all the time. Very little information on the landing page to help the customers understand what's going on. I don't sit there going, oh, my social security number is this, my favorite color is this, my astrology sign is this. That's too much information, right? We see brands do that all the time as well. If your landing page has over 5 paragraphs on it, and this is the first touch point I've ever had with your brand, way too many words right off the bat, right? Or I could just say, I am Chirag. Technically, I've answered their question, but it's not good enough. There's something different. Ladies and gentlemen, when people first meet you, the questions that they tend to ask of you are relatively simple questions. Who are you? What do you do? How do I get involved? Right? How do I get involved is eventually over time, those questions become more and more complex. Right? So it goes, who are you and what do you do, to how can I get involved? Can you integrate with XYZ thing? Can you create this custom feature for me? And what we found is that the more and more I learn about you, ladies and gentlemen, the more and more complex my questions become. And question complexity is the closest thing we have to understand brand loyalty. Because if I'm asking you detailed questions about what you're doing, I'm becoming more and more loyal and interested in what you have to offer. The more I question, the more I learn, and the more I trust. Because ladies and gentlemen, the essence of marketing is answering questions. But effective marketing is being able to balance your audience's curiosity. And what I mean by that is when people come up to me and say, who you are, I say, I'm Chirag, I'm a marketing speaker. I'm Chirag, I work in tech. Why? Because I've answered your question, but I've set the stage for you to ask me a more complex one. Oh, what about marketing? Oh, where in tech do you work? I've made it easier and I've guided the user to the next question. For you all, it's mapping out the user journey. I was working with someone who said that, hey, I have a ton of people coming from social media and I can't figure out what's going on. My marketing's not really working. We end up mapping out every step. The first video, the profile, the landing page, the product page, the checkout page, blah, blah, each step of the process. And we said, let's look at the data. Where are we losing people? We found we're losing a majority of people on the home page. We tried a million things, didn't really work, decided let's just get rid of the home page. Lead everyone from social media straight to the product page. Sales skyrocketed. Because we realized that the questions people tend to ask on a homepage, who are you, what are you doing, can I trust you, they were already answering most of those questions on their Instagram page, on their LinkedIn page. And so by the time people got to the product page, well, they just wanted to buy, but you took them to a homepage that confused them, and they said, you know what, I'll come back a little later. I'm gonna leave you with 3 quick notes here, right? 1, I want you to understand first, who is your audience? See, Barbie does a great job at this. Barbie understands that there's a customer and there's a consumer. In the marketing that tends to go out on TVs or in social media ads, they tend not to mention things like price. They mention things like narratives or stories, right? This is what Barbie's working on. Why? Because they know that at that point, they have their consumer, the user that's going to use the product, right? Not necessarily pay for it the way that the customer does, which is the children. So the goal at that point is to communicate with them about the things that they care about. Then, once they're convinced, and they've convinced their parents that they need this toy, well, they shift the strategy, because once you're in store or online, all of a sudden now they're saying, hey, this is what the price is, this is what the material is, this is where you can get the other pieces. If they spent the time trying to tell the kids what the price was, and the parents what sort of the storyline was, well, they'd be wasting a lot of marketing dollars doing that. Make sense so far? Okay. The second thing I'll quickly toss in is I want you to try to make it as easy as you possibly can for your customer. A good example is, for example, Herman Miller with their quiz that allows you to quickly guide into the right chair for yourself. Or we see the same thing with sort of Warby Parker. And a good example is also Liquid Web here, right? One of the sponsors here at the conference. They have a really cool thing that if you're very confused, which I was when I got on their website, now I'm not really the target audience, however, but they have a thing that says, hey, if none of this made sense to you, we have 24/7 live support. Why don't you reach out to us? We'll help you find the right solution. Even if I never use it, it does help me feel a little bit more like, wow, they're really reliable. 24/7, they'll help me out. And the last thing we'll lead here is I want you to lead with your benefits, not with your features. The iPhone was incredibly successful when it launched, not because it had the best tech, but because while all the other competitors focused on things like, oh, X number of megabytes, well, Apple said 1,000 songs in your pocket. What's in it for you? And a good example of this is Rich Panel. I don't know how you're guaranteeing 30% and reduction in cost and support tickets, but their entire marketing is all about focusing on very specific, tangible results that you'll get before talking about the tech. How are you gonna help me? Oh, cool, how are you gonna do that next? So ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna close out here. If you feel like people don't understand what it is that you do, I need you to be intentional about your echoes. If you feel like people aren't still connecting with what you do, I want you to become very intentional about the 8 types of stories that you're telling. And if you feel like we have the stories and the words, I want you to start understanding the journey that your users are on so that you can identify the questions that they are asking, answer those questions, but guide them to the next step. Don't just give them a bunch of, on the product page, don't just give them a bunch of features and be like, okay, cool, here's what this product does. Hey, here's all the 5 things our product does. Here's how it's gonna help you. By the way, would you like to see some testimonials on how we're helping our clients? Scroll down. Guide them into that next step. Now, as we close out, ladies and gentlemen, here, my parting wisdom to you, if I can be so bold as to say so, is that your story will be written. I really hope that it is written by your pen. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chirag, and one day I will sell out Madison Square Garden, because that is my dream. And today, you were part of that journey. And all I can say is thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to be the keynote speaker for the 2025 Meet Magento Florida Conference. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.